The city was loud, restless, and always awake. But high above the crowded streets, where the lights of cars looked like moving stars, there was a quiet place almost no one knew existed. It was a terrace, hidden away on the roof of an old apartment building. Few ever noticed the narrow stairway that led to it. The door to the rooftop looked old and locked, but if one pushed just right, it opened with a soft creak. Arya found it by accident one late evening. She had been wandering the hallways of her building after a long day, trying to escape her thoughts. The air inside felt heavy, so she climbed the stairs higher than she ever had before. At the very top, she noticed the faded metal door. Rust touched its edges, and ivy crept along the wall beside it. Something about it whispered for her to try. She pushed gently, expecting resistance, but instead the door swung open with surprising ease. A cool breath of night air touched her face. Beyond the doorway stretched a rooftop terrace bathed in silver moonlight. The tiles were cracked in places, and pots with wild plants stood forgotten along the edges, but the view made her heart stop for a moment. From up there, the city looked endless. Towers stretched into the sky, windows glowing like lanterns. The hum of traffic below felt distant, like the soft roar of the sea. Arya stepped forward slowly, her shoes clicking against the old stone. She wrapped her arms around herself and breathed in the night air. The terrace felt untouched, like a secret space that belonged only to her now. She leaned against the low wall at the edge and let her eyes wander over the glowing skyline. For the first time in weeks, she felt calm. Something about the place seemed alive. The air carried a stillness, but also a hidden promise, as if the terrace had been waiting for someone to find it. Arya closed her eyes and let the wind brush against her hair. She almost laughed at how unreal it felt, like stepping into another world right above her ordinary one. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and quickly locked it again. She didn't want the outside world to intrude here. This space was different. It deserved silence. She wandered further along the terrace. In one corner, she noticed a broken chair with a blanket folded neatly over it. The blanket was not dusty, not weathered. Someone had left it there recently. Arya frowned slightly. Was she the only one who knew about this place? Or was it shared by another soul who came here when the city felt too heavy? Her heart beat faster at the thought. The idea of another person knowing this rooftop secret made her curious and nervous at the same time. She touched the blanket softly, almost as if it could answer her questions, then let it be. She sat down on the chair instead, feeling the cool night around her. The silence wrapped her like a second skin, and she let her mind drift. Minutes slipped into an hour. Arya lost track of time as she stared at the stars peeking between clouds. It had been long since she allowed herself to breathe without worry. The rooftop terrace gave her that gift tonight. But then, just as she was thinking about leaving, she heard the faint sound of footsteps on the stairwell behind the door. She froze, heart leaping. The noise grew closer, steady, deliberate. Someone was coming. The door creaked open again. A figure stepped through, tall and quiet, carrying something in one hand. The moonlight caught his face, sharp features, dark hair, and eyes that seemed surprised to see her sitting there. For a moment, both of them stood still, caught in the strange silence between strangers. "You found it," the man said finally, his voice calm but edged with something unreadable. Arya opened her mouth, but no words came. She had thought this rooftop was her secret. Now she realized she was stepping into someone else's. The terrace was not empty. It was shared. And that changed everything. The air between them was sharp with surprise. Arya sat frozen on the chair, her fingers curled around the edge of the seat, while the stranger stood by the door holding a small paper bag. The moonlight traced the outline of his figure, and for a moment, it felt like the terrace itself was holding its breath. "I didn't know anyone else came up here," Arya managed to say finally. Her voice sounded softer than she intended. The man tilted his head, studying her with curious eyes. "Most don't. It isn't easy to find." He stepped forward slowly, careful, as if testing how welcome he was. He placed the paper bag on the low wall, then leaned against it with practiced ease. "You must be new here." Arya shook her head. "I've lived in this building for a year. I just never climbed this high before." A small smile touched his lips. "Then the terrace chose tonight to show itself to you." His words carried a strange weight, almost playful, but not fully a joke. Arya raised a brow. "The terrace chose." "Maybe," he said. "This place isn't ordinary. People walk past that old door every day, but most don't notice it. The few who do, well, they find something here they didn't know they needed." His answer left her silent. She looked around at the plants, the cracked tiles, the forgotten blanket. The rooftop did feel different, like it existed outside the normal flow of the city. "I didn't mean to intrude," Arya said finally. "If this is your space," he lifted a hand, stopping her. "No. It isn't mine. I only visit." "Same as you." The tension eased slightly, though her heart was still racing. She studied him more closely now. He looked young, perhaps a few years older than her, with a calmness in his posture that didn't quite match the restless city below. "What do you come here for?" she asked, her curiosity escaping before she could stop it. He thought for a moment, then looked out at the skyline. "To breathe," he said simply. "Down there, everything moves too fast. Up here, the noise fades. I can think. Sometimes that's enough." Arya understood. She felt the same thing the moment she stepped onto the terrace. It was a pause, a place untouched by chaos. He reached into the paper bag and pulled out a small thermos and 2 cups. Without asking, he poured something steaming into both. He walked toward her, offering 1 cup. She hesitated, then accepted. The warmth spread through her fingers. "Tea," he said. "Not dangerous?" His lips curved slightly as if reading her caution. Arya took a sip. The taste was gentle, floral, and calming. She found herself relaxing in his presence, though she still didn't know his name. "Do you often bring tea to secret rooftops?" she asked, half teasing. "Only to this one," he replied. "And only at night. The city looks different under the moon." They fell into a quiet rhythm. He sipped his tea, eyes drifting to the skyline, while Arya sat across from him, watching both the view and the stranger who seemed oddly at home here. Time moved slowly, each moment stretched by the soft hum of the night air. Finally, she asked, "What's your name?" He looked at her, as if deciding whether to answer. Then, simply, he said, "Elias." "Arya," she offered back. Their names hung in the air, like 2 keys unlocking a door neither had known existed. A gust of wind rustled the plants, and somewhere below, the faint sound of music drifted up from the street. Arya shivered, not from cold, but from the strange awareness that this meeting mattered. It wasn't random. The terrace had brought them together, just as he had said. Elias noticed her quietness. "Don't worry," he said gently. I don't ask questions you don't want to answer. You don't owe me anything. Not even your company. If you want, I can leave. The thought surprised her. She realized she didn't want him to leave. No, she said quickly. Stay. For now. Something softened in his expression, as if her words carried more weight than she knew. He nodded once. They returned to silence, but it was no longer uncomfortable. It felt like the beginning of something, fragile yet undeniable. The rooftop was no longer just her secret. It was theirs. And though she didn't know why, Arya felt certain this night was only the start of what the terrace planned to reveal. The next evening, Arya found herself climbing the stairs again. She told herself it was only curiosity that pushed her up past the familiar floors, but deep inside, she knew it was more. Something about the rooftop terrace called to her now, the same way a secret song lingers in the mind after being heard only once. When she reached the old door, her heart gave a nervous flutter. She wondered if Elias would be there again. For a moment she hesitated, hand resting on the handle, then she pushed it open. The night air greeted her. The terrace looked the same, plants leaning toward the moon, the city glowing like a sea of fireflies. But this time she wasn't alone. Elias was sitting on the low wall, one leg drawn up, staring at the horizon. "You came back," he said, his voice calm, almost as if he had expected her. Arya stepped closer. "So did you." He smiled faintly, as if sharing a private joke. "The terrace doesn't like being forgotten." She sat down on the chair from the night before, and for a while, they simply watched the skyline together. The silence between them was easier now, shaped by their first meeting. After some minutes, Arya broke the stillness. "Yesterday, you said this place isn't ordinary. What did you mean?" Elias glanced at her, his eyes dark but steady. "Have you noticed how quiet it is up here? You can hear the city, but it sounds distant, like a memory. And if you listen closely enough," he paused, tilting his head as if to demonstrate. "You hear whispers." Arya frowned, half thinking he was teasing her. "Whispers. Not voices exactly," he explained. "More like echoes. The wind carries things here, sounds, words, maybe even pieces of thoughts. It feels like the terrace remembers people who've stood here before us." Arya turned her head, listening. At first there was nothing but the steady breath of wind. But then, faintly, she thought she caught something, a soft murmur, like a sigh or a half-spoken phrase. It faded quickly, leaving her unsure if it was real. Her skin tingled. "I think I heard it." Elias nodded, his expression unreadable. "It never says the same thing twice. Each visitor hears what they need most." "What did you hear the first time?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. His gaze lingered on the glowing skyline. Finally, he said, "It told me not to run anymore." Arya wanted to ask what he had been running from, but something in his voice warned her not to press. She held the question back, letting it rest between them like an unopened letter. Instead, she said softly, "Last night, I felt like this place was waiting for me. Like I was meant to find it." "That's how it begins," Elias said. "You think you discovered the terrace. Then you realize it discovered you." His words unsettled her, yet at the same time, they stirred something inside her. She didn't believe in fate, not really, but sitting here beside him, under the strange quiet of the terrace, she felt as though the city itself had guided her steps. The wind picked up, brushing strands of hair across her face. She tucked them behind her ear, noticing Elias watching her. His gaze wasn't heavy, but it carried a quiet intensity, like he was memorizing her presence. To ease the moment, Arya stood and began walking slowly along the terrace's edge. She noticed more details she hadn't seen before: a cracked flowerpot with dried petals, a small wooden box half hidden behind a planter, and faint scratches along the wall, as if someone had carved letters long ago. She bent down, tracing the marks with her fingers. "Their initials," she murmured. "A and R. J and L, people leave pieces of themselves here," Elias said from behind her. "Some come for comfort, some for escape. Some just to be remembered." Arya felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cool night. The terrace wasn't just stone and plants. It was a keeper of secrets. And now, she and Elias were becoming part of its story. She turned back toward him. "Why are you telling me all this?" "Because you'll keep coming back," he said simply. "And it's better if you know you're not just sitting on empty tiles." His certainty startled her. She opened her mouth to deny it, but the truth pressed against her lips. He was right. She would return. She already belonged to this place, and in some way, to this strange connection forming between them. The whispers rose again, faint but clear enough this time to make her chest tighten. A soft voice brushed her ear, saying words she could not ignore: "Don't be afraid." She drew in a breath, glancing at Elias. His eyes told her he had heard something too. And for the first time, Arya realized the terrace wasn't just keeping secrets, it was speaking them. Days slipped into a quiet rhythm. Every evening, after her work was done and the city grew restless with neon lights, Arya found her way up the narrow stairwell to the rooftop terrace. And almost always, Elias was already there, waiting with his quiet smile and his thermos of tea. At first, their meetings were filled with silence, comfortable, unhurried silence. They would sit together, letting the whispers of the terrace float around them, both of them listening but never trying to catch too much at once. Slowly, words began to slip into their nights, small fragments of conversation that grew into longer talks. Arya learned that Elias had lived in the building longer than she had. He didn't say much about his past, only that he moved through the city like a shadow, working jobs that paid enough but left no trace of him. "I prefer not to be noticed," he said once. "It's easier that way." She wanted to ask why, but she held the question, letting it rest. Instead, she shared small pieces of herself. She spoke of her restless thoughts, how the city often made her feel invisible, how she longed for something steady and real. She didn't know why she trusted him with these truths, but the terrace seemed to demand honesty. One night, while the wind was soft and the sky glittered with stars, Elias leaned back against the low wall and asked, "Do you ever feel like you're carrying words you'll never say?" Arya nodded slowly. "All the time." He looked at her, his gaze steady. "That's why people come here. The terrace listens when no one else will." Something in the way he said it made her heart stir. She realized then that their meetings weren't chance. The terrace had brought them together because both of them carried unsaid words. As the days turned into weeks, their bond grew stronger. They began to laugh more, their silences now filled with warmth instead of uncertainty. Elias showed her how to read the scratches on the walls, tiny carvings of initials, dates, even short phrases left behind by others who had once found the terrace. Together, they pieced stories from those faint marks, creating tales of lovers who met in secret, of friends who promised forever, of strangers who left behind their whispers. One evening, Arya brought a small notebook with her. She opened it on her lap, and by the dim light of the city below, She began to sketch the skyline. Elias leaned closer, watching her pencil move. "You draw," he said softly, a hint of surprise in his tone. "Not seriously," she admitted, cheeks warming. "It just helps me remember." "Then you'll never forget this place," he said. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, the night, the terrace, and the unspoken current between their souls. Arya's breath caught, and she quickly looked down at her notebook, though she could still feel his gaze. The terrace whispered again that night, more clearly than before. Arya heard it as she traced the lines of a tower on her page. A soft voice, brushing against her ear, whispered, "Stay." Her hand froze. She looked at Elias, wondering if he heard the same. His eyes were distant, thoughtful, and then he gave a small nod, as if agreeing with something unseen. Another night, rain threatened to fall, and Arya nearly decided not to climb the stairs. But her feet carried her upward anyway, and when she stepped onto the terrace, she found Elias waiting under a large umbrella. He held it out toward her, his other hand carrying the usual thermos. "You'd have come even if I wasn't here," he said, reading her surprise. "But I didn't want the rain to stop you." Arya laughed softly, the sound echoing off the damp tiles. They stood under the umbrella together, the city lights blurred by the misty drizzle. She realized then how natural it felt to share this space with him, how the terrace no longer felt like hers or his, it was theirs. And with every night, every whispered word, every shared silence, the bond between them deepened. The terrace had begun as a secret. Now, it was becoming a bridge, tying two restless souls together under the open sky. Yet deep inside, Arya felt a stirring of unease. The whispers were growing louder, clearer, as if pushing them towards something. She couldn't shake the sense that the terrace wasn't done with its secrets and that soon, it would demand more from them both. The rooftop terrace had become part of Arya's life. Every evening, her feet carried her up the narrow stairwell as if drawn by invisible strings. Elias was always there, waiting in his quiet way, and the city below always stretched out like an endless sea of stars. But lately, something had changed. The whispers were stronger. At first, they had been soft, fleeting sounds, faint words carried on the wind. Now they lingered, clearer, almost insistent. Arya would hear her name, spoken low and breathless, or phrases that made her chest tighten, "Look closer. Not safe. Choose wisely." One night, when the sky was heavy with clouds and the city lights seemed dim, Arya confessed what she was hearing. "Elias," she said, her hands wrapped tightly around the warm cup of tea he had given her, "the whispers, they're louder now. Sometimes I think they're warning me." He didn't look surprised. Instead, his gaze hardened slightly, as if he had expected this moment. "They warned me too," he said quietly. "That's how I found the truth." Arya frowned. "What truth?" He stood and walked to one of the planters near the corner of the terrace. He knelt, pulled aside the overgrown leaves, and revealed something hidden beneath a small metal hatch, flush with the tiles. Its edges were rusty, but a faint symbol was etched into the surface, a circle broken by a jagged line. Arya's breath caught. "What is that?" "The terrace was built as part of this building's design," Elias explained, his voice low. "But not for leisure. Long ago, before we were born, this building belonged to a group that dealt in secrets. They used this rooftop as their meeting place. Beneath here, they hid what they didn't want the world to see." Arya knelt beside him, staring at the hatch. The whispers seemed louder now, curling around her ears like smoke. "Don't open it," they hissed. "Not yet." Her fingers trembled as she reached toward the symbol, but Elias gently caught her wrist. "Careful. Once you touch it, the terrace won't let you walk away easily." Her heart pounded. "Then why show me this?" "Because," he said, meeting her eyes, "you already belong to this place. Pretending you don't won't change that. You hear the whispers more clearly because the terrace chose you. And it doesn't choose lightly." Arya pulled her hand back, fear mixing with curiosity. "What's inside?" Elias hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't know. I never opened it. But I've seen enough to know it's dangerous. The terrace, it doesn't just keep memories. It holds power." The weight of his words pressed against her. She glanced around at the carvings, the old blanket, the broken chair, all the little traces left by others. How many people had stood where she now knelt, tempted by the hatch? How many had walked away? How many hadn't? The wind rose sharply, carrying a whisper so clear it made her shiver. "Decide." Arya stood quickly, stepping back from the hatch. "I didn't come here to find danger," she said, her voice unsteady. "I came here because this place felt safe." Elias rose too, his expression unreadable. Safety and truth rarely live in the same place. They fell into silence, but it wasn't the soft, comforting silence they had shared before. This silence was heavy, filled with the hatch's shadow. Arya sipped her tea, but the warmth didn't calm her. The terrace no longer felt like a gentle secret, it felt alive, watching, waiting. Finally, she whispered, "Elias, if the terrace is dangerous, why do you keep coming back?" His answer was simple, but it struck her deeply. "Because it's the only place I feel real. Everywhere else, I'm just passing through. Here, I matter. Even if it costs me." Arya's chest tightened. She wanted to tell him she felt the same, but fear tangled her words. Instead, she looked out at the skyline, her mind racing. The terrace had given her peace, then whispers, then Elias. Now it was giving her choices. She didn't know if she was ready. But one truth was clear, the terrace had secrets buried in its bones, and sooner or later, it would demand they face them. The night was restless. The city below pulsed with light and noise, but up on the terrace, every sound seemed magnified: the creak of the old door, the sigh of the wind, even the distant hum of traffic. Arya paced along the edge, her mind spinning. Elias watched her quietly, leaning against the low wall. He held the thermos loosely in one hand, but his attention was entirely on her. "You've been thinking about it all day," he said finally. Arya stopped, gripping the railing. "I can't stop. That hatch, the whispers. I keep imagining what's inside. And now it feels like everything depends on whether we open it or not." Elias pushed off the wall and stepped closer. "Maybe it does. But maybe it's not about what's inside. Maybe it's about what we choose to face together." Her chest tightened. "I'm scared, Elias. What if we're not ready?" He shook his head slowly. "You're already here. That means you are ready, even if you don't believe it." For a moment, the terrace was silent except for the wind. Then a stronger whisper brushed her ear, carrying the same words from before: "Decide. Choose." Arya swallowed hard. She felt the weight of the terrace pressing on her, pulling her toward the hatch. She looked at Elias, his eyes steady, unwavering. "We can't just wait forever," she said. He nodded, and together, they approached the metal hatch. The closer they got, the colder the tiles felt under their feet, as if the terrace itself was warning them. Arya's hand hovered over the etched symbol, trembling. "Do you trust me?" Elias asked, his voice low. She met his eyes. "With everything." He smiled faintly, and that small gesture gave her courage. They pressed their hands together on the hatch. The metal was cold, almost alive beneath their fingers. A faint vibration ran through it, sending shivers up their arms. "On three," Elias whispered. Arya nodded. 1, 2, 3. They lifted the hatch together. A soft click echoed in the night, and a faint glow spilled out from the opening below. The light was warm and pulsing, like it had a heartbeat of its own. Arya leaned closer, peering down. She could see old scrolls, jars, and delicate trinkets arranged with care. But the centerpiece was a small crystal, suspended in a beam of light. It seemed to hum softly, almost speaking to them. "The terrace kept this hidden," Elias said, his voice barely audible. "It's older than the building, older than us. It holds memories, warnings, and maybe something more." Arya's heart raced. She felt drawn to the crystal, but a part of her hesitated. The whispers were louder now, urgent, "Don't touch it alone." "Together." "Together," she whispered back. Elias nodded. They reached in at the same time, lifting the crystal carefully. The glow expanded, surrounding their hands. For a moment, the wind stopped. The city seemed to vanish. Then a rush of images filled Arya's mind, faces she had never seen, voices speaking in languages long forgotten, moments of joy and sorrow trapped in the crystal. She gasped, stumbling back slightly, but Elias held her steady. "It's showing us," he said, voice shaking. "Everything the terrace remembers." The crystal pulsed faster. The whispers became a chorus, overlapping, guiding, warning. Arya's pulse raced. "It's too much," she said. "I can't." Elias pressed a hand to her back. "Yes, you can. We can. Together." They stood there, holding the crystal, their hearts pounding, and for the first time, Arya understood the terrace's choice. It had brought them together not just to uncover secrets, but to face them side by side. The glow softened. The whispers quieted, leaving only the steady hum of the crystal. Arya looked at Elias, her eyes wide but certain. "We did it," she whispered. Elias gave a small nod, a rare smile breaking across his face. "Yes. Together." But even as relief washed over her, Arya knew this wasn't the end. The terrace had given them a glimpse of something powerful, something that would change their lives forever. And now, they had to decide what to do next, what to reveal, what to keep, and how to survive the truth the rooftop held. The night felt heavier, full of possibility and danger, but Arya no longer felt alone. Elias was there. And together, they had faced the breaking point. The rooftop terrace had never felt so alive. The glow from the crystal bathed the tiles in soft, golden light, and the whispers had quieted into something almost like music. Arya stood beside Elias, their hands still pressed against the crystal, hearts beating in unison. The city below moved on, unaware that something extraordinary was unfolding above it. Arya took a deep breath. "It's beautiful," she whispered. The light reflected in her eyes, and Elias could see her awe mirrored in the trembling edges of her smile. "Yes," he said softly. "But it's more than that. The crystal holds the terrace's true secret." She looked at him, curious and nervous. What secret? Elias gestured toward the glow. It remembers everyone who ever came here. Every thought, every wish, every fear, all of it is stored inside. But more than that, it shows you what you need to see to understand yourself. Arya's gaze dropped to the crystal. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a strange mix of fear and hope. The whispers, the carvings, the hidden hatch, they had all led to this moment. She reached out, touching the crystal again. This time, the images weren't overwhelming. Instead, they were clear, moments of her life she had overlooked, choices she had made, fears she had hidden even from herself. And beside them, shadowy glimpses of Elias, his quiet struggles, his silent longing, the nights he had spent alone. "You've been carrying so much," she said softly, turning to him. "And I never knew." Elias's lips curved in a faint, tired smile. "Neither did you. Until now." The crystal pulsed once, and the whispers returned soft, gentle, like a sigh of relief. "Together. Only together." Arya looked up at Elias, her hand still in his. "I think I understand. The terrace, it brought us here so we could face our fears. Not alone. But together." He nodded, his eyes locked on hers. "Exactly. That's why it chose us. The secret isn't just the crystal or what's hidden beneath the tiles. It's this: the bond, the trust, the courage to stand side by side, even when the unknown is terrifying." The realization settled over them, heavy but freeing. Arya felt a lightness she hadn't known in months. The terrace wasn't dangerous because it hid the crystal, it was dangerous because it demanded honesty and bravery. And they had given it both. A sudden breeze lifted the leaves and carried the city sounds softly across the terrace. The glow of the crystal began to fade, settling into a gentle shimmer, like the terrace itself was satisfied. Arya turned toward Elias. "So, this is the final secret." "For now," he said with a smile. "The terrace will always have more to teach, more to show. But the most important part has been revealed, the connection between us, and what we're capable of when we trust it and each other." Arya felt warmth spread through her chest as she stepped closer to him. "I never imagined I'd find something like this, or someone like you, in a place like this." Elias reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "The terrace has a way of surprising people. Sometimes in ways you don't expect, but exactly what you need." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the city below and the faint, satisfied whispers of the terrace. The night felt endless, full of possibility, yet comforting in its stillness. Finally, Arya whispered, "Thank you for bringing me here. For staying." Elias's hand tightened around hers. "Thank you for coming. For trusting. For being here." For the first time, Arya didn't feel restless, didn't feel the need to escape. The terrace had given her something she didn't even realize she needed: a sense of belonging, a shared courage, and a bond that would carry her through the nights ahead. The crystal dimmed completely, leaving the terrace bathed in moonlight alone. Yet it didn't feel empty. It had given them its secret, and now, it existed quietly, waiting for the next moment, the next soul it might guide. Arya looked at Elias, and without a word, they stepped closer, hands still entwined, and together, they walked to the edge of the terrace. The city stretched below them, vast and endless, but up here, on their secret rooftop, they had found a place that was theirs. A place where danger, mystery, and truth had brought them together, and where nothing could separate them. The terrace had revealed its final secret. And in doing so, it had changed their lives forever.